It's more important today than it was back then, right? Because you could do a lot back then in terms of manual bidding, in terms of keywords. You had a lot more control. And I think now, as the control's being taken away from us and AI is coming in, I think your inputs are just more important than ever.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Paid Search NYC podcast. Today, super excited to be chatting to Tomasz Abbott-Wieczorek. Here is a paid search expert, consultant. He's audited over $1 billion in Google ad spend in the last decade. He's worked with big names like Domino's, Huel. He's the founder of PPC Profit Club, and he's repping some merch today, which is awesome. That's a community for paid search freelancers and agency owners to upscale their business, which is super cool. And the last thing I'll say is also a big proponent of AI. A lot of the content I know you put out is AI focused, and that's why I think you're super well placed to chat about today's subject, which is AI Max, Google's new campaign type. So super excited to get into that. Tomasz, welcome, and thanks for coming on.
Appreciate it. Hello. Thank you very much for having me.
Of course. So we were actually just chatting before you came on about how you managed to do what you do. You know, I talked a little bit about the fact that you're a consultant, you're running PPC Profit Club, you're putting out lots of content. And my question to you is, how big's the team? But it sounds like it's just you.
Yeah, I'm flattered with the kind of backhanded compliment to start there. How big is my team? Yeah, it's just me. So yeah, I'm based out of Manchester in the UK. I did a lot of traveling the last couple of years, but yeah, really settled down to build PPC Profit Club the last year or so. And yeah, AI is helping me a lot in my daily content, building out products, finding out what people really want and analyzing a lot of pain points for PPCs. But yeah, I'm working a lot with AI. I've been doing a lot more masterclasses around AI, how you can use it, mostly how you can save time with it, really. I found that's the main thing for Google Ads specialists nowadays, because there's so much out there, right? There's so much you could do, but it's really figuring out, prioritizing what you can do. And if you can reclaim some of your time, then that's the most important thing, right? Because time is the thing that you can never get back.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's such an interesting time right now where, because of the pace of development, there's just this huge gap developing between people like yourself who are doing that and people who are maybe even just a year or two behind. And when you compare those two people in terms of the output, or even just how much they would have to charge the client for the same amount of work, there's a gap really developing there. So and that's awesome that you're kind of at the forefront of all that, which is really cool. That as you were talking, the one thing that reminded me as well is, I think it was Sam Altman who came out maybe in the last year or so and talked about the fact that AI will lead to the first $1 billion single person company. And that kind of, as you were talking there, reminded me of that, because it's these tools enable you to be so productive as an individual that it gives you the ability to scale whatever you're doing to the point where you don't need 100,000 people to create a big company. So very cool.
Yeah, I completely followed Sam's recent talk on the takeaway that I had was him talking about how younger people, especially in their 20s and 30s, were using ChatGPT more like an operating system, which I came away and just thought about for honestly days and weeks after watching that talk, because that's how it's kind of from the person who, created OpenAI, right? Or from the leader of OpenAI, at least. He's saying this is how you should use it. This is how we're seeing people get the most out of it. So I think people should take a lot of stock in that, and go away and really think about, what does he mean in terms of operating system, right? We've heard brainstorming partner a lot, but operating system is the next level there. And yeah, I completely agree. That $1 billion idea of a one person company, hopefully we'll get there.
Yeah, nice. This is an absolute sidetrack, but I really enjoy this particular topic, because I was actually watching the interview with Sundar on The Verge Decoder yesterday, and he was talking about how this is really going to change how we interact with the web. This is the next phase of it all, and it's so interesting because there have been multiple times over the last 10 years where technologists have made bold claims about a new emerging technology going to be the next big thing, and I'm thinking of voice VR. And so you kind of get a bit numb to this, okay, yeah, sure. Now, the guy who's building it thinks it's going to be the next big thing. But it's starting to transpire that this actually might be the next big thing. I don't think there's any doubt about that now. We're all just trying to figure out how big, and as time goes on, I think we have to keep leveling up how big we think this is, and how much it's going to impact our lives, which is not the conversation for today, but a very interesting one anyway. The conversation for today is AI Max. So Google came out GML a couple of weeks ago. I think we generally had an idea that this was coming. Search Max were the rumors weeks before, became AI Max. Talk us through what is AI Max?
Yeah, so AI Max, in my mind, is like dynamic search ads meets optimized targeting meets final URL expansion. And it's kind of bringing the smart stuff from Performance Max, like that nice algorithm that Performance Max seems to have that a lot of the other campaign types don't really have yet. All the smart stuff to search campaigns in a smaller way. So I see this as very much like a optional add-on for search campaigns that you could use if you don't necessarily want to use Performance Max, or you're a smaller advertiser. I think they're really going for that as well, in terms of Google's trying to appeal to lead gen advertisers that typically don't use Performance Max as much or are more resistant to it. And yeah, AI Max, it's a lot of the things we've been seeing already, automated assets, automated text, ad copy pulled from your landing page and then created with AI. URL expansion, so letting it pick sort of or having some wider control in terms of landing pages, and then to me it looks very much like optimized targeting for search, in terms of it's going to go outside of your targeting and expand on that in terms of finding new keywords that you didn't necessarily put into your search campaigns. So yeah, it's really interesting, AI Max.
Yeah. Do you think there's a place to believe that this isn't? What am I trying to say? Is there any way people can resist this change? Like, is this net something that's going to benefit advertisers, or is there an argument that auto asset creation, auto matching, dynamic URL expansion isn't necessarily a good thing, or are we at a place now where we've seen these tools in action, we've seen the automation, no, we can't do a better job, so there's going to be instances where some advertisers might not, and there's a reason for that. But on the whole, this is a benefit for advertisers.
Yeah, I think the key thing to look at is I always look at how Google talks about something, because I think you can take a lot from that, right? You can take a lot from how they're thinking about it internally, how they're thinking that it will integrate to your campaigns, because ultimately, they are the platform we're using, right? So they have all the data on how it's going to, maybe not how it's going to shake out in the real world completely, but at least they have a good idea. So looking at the case studies, the L'Oreal one from GML, they talked about a 27% increase in conversions, a similar CPA. Of course, we don't always get the full story with these case studies, and there's a lot of caveats that people are quick to point out online. And I think for me, it's not about discounting the case study. It's just more about having the full picture, right? Like, that could be true, but then could it also be true that that account maybe didn't focus on adding new keywords in the last 6 months? Maybe they focused on a big YouTube campaign in the account, right, for the last 6 months, because they talked about this 27% coming from net new search terms and keywords being added through AI Max, right? So again, it's like, were those keywords that should have been added in that account, and maybe they just weren't focusing on that for the time being? Because I find, I work on a lot of accounts, a few $100,000 or $500,000 a month spend. And what I find is it's very tough, as you probably know, to focus on everything all the time. There's so many moving parts in an account like that. So maybe the last 6 months has just been about, as Google's told us all to focus on, maybe the last 6 or 12 months has just been about conversion tracking, attribution, server-side stuff, advanced conversion tracking. Maybe they've just been focused on that, and actually keywords have taken a back seat. So I would always just be really interested to find out exactly what is behind those big numbers in those case studies,
Yeah, context is important. I wonder then how advertisers generally think about it as a product as and when it becomes available. It feels like where we've been in a place before, with advertisers resisting certain new products. Performance Max was a big one. I feel like Performance Max was probably a bigger development than AI Max in some ways in terms of what it meant. And there was obviously a lot of resistance there. Has it changed? Should advertisers more willingly lean into this, providing the context makes sense?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I mean, if we go back to the Performance Max rollout, I think it was completely botched, and the rollout was like very confusing from a marketing point of view. The first time I heard of Performance Max from Google was that it was going to be an all-in-one solution for small businesses. And then, as we know, that turned out to be completely the opposite in the future. So maybe that was a case of they didn't really know what it was internally yet when it was at the like early beta stage. But yeah, and then it did a complete 360, and now, you know, we're kind of being pushed into it in pretty much every account, from lead gen to small to big accounts, you know. So it seems like it's a lot clearer with AI Max in terms of the rollout so far, who it's for, what it's for, and how you can use it. And I feel like they've done a lot of work to actually help us to understand, you know, the benefits of it. So I do think that will go a long way with helping people actually implement it, you know?
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, and I agree. I think they definitely did a better job on the marketing and positioning. How do advertisers then, let's say we're agreed in terms of lean into it, you know, because we understand it better. How would you optimize this? What do we know about how you can optimize this?
Yeah, so I think going back to my question about like, I'm curious because we haven't really seen much out in the wild yet of this. I'm curious how it's going to interact with the keywords that you have, and then how far it's going to go outside of that, right? So I think that's a big question, is like reviewing the keywords that you already have and then figuring out, okay, like what do we know about AI Max at that point? Okay, how far is it going to go outside of that? You know, we kind of see similar stuff with like optimized targeting or final URL expansion. Like once you know the parameters that it's going after, then you can sort of go back and say, hey, like we're going to put in these keywords to not game the system, but to just, you know, get the most out of it and leverage it as much as you can, right?
Yeah, I think it comes back to the fact that we're always optimizing something. It just changes what we're optimizing. And your point around kind of how it interacts with the rest of the account. So I want to say I've seen something that shows that the hierarchy system is still in place. So maybe an exact match keyword still wins over everything. Assuming that stays the case, this feels like a campaign type that will exist in a year's time alongside search still. Kind of in the same way that PMax and shopping do, because PMax has been around for 4 years now, and there's still a lot of accounts that run both. So do you think this will be the case where in 4 years' time we'll still have AI Max and search campaigns?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things I've been thinking about here. One is I predict that this will sunset DSA, because we haven't seen a meaningful update to DSA in a while, and it's one of my favorite features in Google Ads for a long time. But it does seem like the last year or two, the algorithm with DSA has not kept up with the algorithm for like Performance Max or some of the other campaign types, and it doesn't just necessarily do as well as it should, with DSA recently. So it seems like we haven't had a big update there in a while. So it does feel like this is the kind of upgraded DSA, just similarly to how we saw like demand gen being the upgraded discovery, right? And bringing it into the new AI world. I think the other thing is like landing pages, right? So it'll be pulling a lot more from landing pages with all these new smart campaigns. And I totally agree with you. The hierarchy is still going to be a massive thing. It's something that, especially on bigger accounts, I consult on a lot and spend a lot of time looking into, is how can we strategize in terms of hierarchy, what's going to go into the auction, what's going to have priority here. And then it really comes back to the fundamentals like ad rank and, setting your budgets correctly, using things like portfolio bids or, campaign groups or, all these sort of like folder based things you can do in Google Ads to group your bids together or group your budgets together, or like just organize your account a little bit better. So then you can kind of get the right hierarchy you want, right? Of course, not 100%, but to get to the point where, yeah, you're kind of leveraging that hierarchy, right? Which I feel like no one really does. Most accounts I see don't even like take a think about it at all. And that hierarchy, as you said, I think is going to be way more important as we see like loads more campaign types coming out.
Yeah. I wonder, just as we're talking there and making like direct comparisons to other tools and features, so comparing to DSA, comparing to PMAX, comparing to discovery, to demand gen, have we maybe blown this up as a bigger update than it actually is?
Yeah, I think if you think of it as an upgraded DSA, it makes a lot more sense, right? And I think it makes sense that you're then like integrating DSA in like a more natural way into search campaigns, because at the moment it felt like a little bit of like a side thought, that, you know, if you were Google and you wanted to up DSA's adoption, what would you do, right? You would give it AI, you would give it some new features, you would give it the algorithm from Performance Max, which is seemingly the best algorithm out of all the campaign types, and you would give it a shiny Max name. I don't know about the Max name though, because I've seen a lot of people thinking that Max means all the inventory. So I'm not sure about that one, because everyone thinks now that it's running on display, which seemingly it's not. So I think that's maybe a misstep in terms of naming. But yeah, what do you think happened with the Search Max name? Like, do you think that'll be a different product now, or that this is what it became, or what do you think happened there?
Yeah, great question. I have no idea. I mean, it felt like that name change was pretty last minute, if not literally the last minute. So that Search Max name was around internally, and the people who were beta testing it probably knew it as Search Max. So that felt like a last minute change. Someone high up came in and said, "I don't like that name. Change it." That's my best guess.
More AI. It just needed more AI in everything, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm kind of surprised we didn't get it. It wasn't called like Gemini something, because it seems like they're now rebranding everything into Gemini. But yeah, it's like typical Google, just having complicated naming schemes and none of it making sense, right?
Yeah. Never a dull moment. Okay, cool. I think that's super interesting to sort of break it down like that, and then there's direct comparisons to help realize that this is very similar to what we've seen before. The fundamentals don't change in terms of the inputs. Maybe they changed a little bit, but it's not new inputs. It's just inputs from other places now becoming part of a search campaign, and the way we optimize changes slightly, but we are still optimizing. So I think the approach to Google Ads and sort of critical thinking and taking client goals and translating them to the platform is still very important. Is there anything else that changes in terms of how to think about Google Ads or search that changes with this, or have we kind of covered the main ways we're impacted?
I guess quite a strong stance I'm taking here is on landing pages, that from my community, my students and my clients, I coach, and my clients in terms of Google Ads accounts, I see across the board the best results with people that are creating their own landing pages, when the Google Ads specialist is also running the landing page in terms of the copy, and at least having a big input into that landing page. It doesn't necessarily have to be you building it out completely, right? Like, we're not all web developers, but you know, with AI now, there's a lot more help as far as landing page builders. But I see the best results with people building out their own landing pages now, and matching something that I've been going on for years at this point about, is closely matching your ad copy to your landing page copy. And it's one of the first things I learned almost a decade ago now with Google Ads. And it seems like it got lost in translation over that time. And with every account I look into, it's like completely different landing page to the ad. And I'm like, if somebody clicked on this ad, went through to this landing page, they're going to bounce because it's not the same. I don't understand what it is at a glance. And, you know, following this 3-second rule of, okay, do I get what it is at a glance above the fold? Again, something I learned almost a decade ago that still stands today, is just being lost. And actually, I would argue that it's more important today than it was back then, right? Because you could do a lot back then in terms of manual bidding, in terms of keywords. You had a lot more control. And I think now, as the control is being taken away from us and AI is coming in, I think your inputs are just more important than ever. So I'd really advise people to look at your landing pages way more, and just start with that. For example, start with, is it congruent, right? It's something I've been really like swimming around in my head a lot recently, is just congruency. Like, is it basically, does it make sense? Is it the same? Is it similar? And Google's going to reward you for that, right?
Yeah, I hear a lot about that. And I think the optimization from I guess you're talking about from a CRO perspective there is important. I think the benefit to also leaning into that world is I chatting to a lot of my colleagues in like the organic world, and that a big part of what they do is on-page technicals and content. And I think what's really interesting is how that's going to start changing or impacting the things that we do, because as the content changes on the website, that might change what you match to for certain, based on certain keywords and conversational search on Google side. So yeah, I think leaning into that world is definitely very beneficial. How you mentioned there about you don't necessarily have to be the one building the landing pages, you just have to be the one advising. Is it as simple as just make sure that the content in the ad copy isn't a landing page, or there's a landing page that exists that's like that? Or do you go deeper in terms of structure and deeper CRO, conversion rate optimization?
Yeah, there's so many levels to it as far as landing page optimization, honestly. But if we take it back and not even talk about CRO, if we take it back to just copy, like I'm doing a masterclass next week on copy, because I heard a lot of people about landing pages, and I just found, like, really diving into it, that it really just comes back to copy. And if you nail that, then that's like 90% of the way there, right? People always focus on these little, okay, what color is this button? And, where should I put this button? And it's like, that's the 1% things, just like in Google Ads, where we have all this talk about advanced strategies when people aren't nailing the relationship between the ad copy and the landing page, right? So for me, for example, I always start, when I'm writing new ads, I start from the landing page, right? I start by literally copy and pasting the landing page copy, and then seeing, does this make sense in Google Ads if this was an ad? And if it doesn't, then probably there's something wrong with your landing page copy, right? Because your landing page is as much an ad as your Google Ads is.
Yeah, that makes sense. If you can share, what AI tools are you using in that process?
Yeah, so ChatGPT is great for ideation and research, deep research. This recommendation changes so much, right? But I love Claude for writing. I still think Claude is the best writing tool. And what else am I using? I'm trying out Gemini. I'm really trying, honestly. I haven't had much success with it yet. I'm hoping, though, like with all the new releases and the deep research and everything, I think it's getting there, and I think it has the potential to be the front runner and be the daily driver for me in terms of AI. And I'll tell you why, because in my opinion, the company who wins the AI race is the one that wins the personal context race, right? So personal context is the most important thing in a AI system, right? And that's what makes it an operating system. That's what makes it your personal assistant, like in Iron Man with Jarvis, right? Like that's what makes it a Jarvis level assistant. And I don't think ChatGPT's implementation of memories right now is that great. I think Claude project knowledge is really fantastic, and I use that a lot, and I give it a lot of great inputs. But yeah, Gemini has the most potential. Maybe we're not quite there yet, but Gemini has the most potential because it's Google, right? It's because it's what we're talking about this whole podcast. It's got everything, right, from your Google account. Like most of us, you run your life inside of Google. You have all your docs, you have your Drive, you have your Gmail, you have all your notes, you have your photos, you have literally everything that you need for an amazing assistant if it can tap into all of that. So I'm really, really excited for like the next stage of Gemini because they announced that Google I/O, right? They spoke how that's coming soon, as Google always says. So let's see when it's here, but I'm excited for that.
I agree. The point around having the additional context is really, really interesting. And yeah, those who already have those access to those data sources that's already part of the same workspace, whatever you want to call it, definitely have an advantage. And I agree that, yeah, Google seems best placed for that. I think what's really interesting is if you really start to think about it, we're going to enter the next phase of how we interact with the web, as Sundar said yesterday, or not yesterday, but that was when I watched it. And what's really interesting is we're going to be having new conversations about privacy, because the level of privacy is going to be front and center again. The stakes going to be higher. These systems are going to have even more data about us, to the point where the way we're running advertising is even more targeted. So, but one conversation I was having yesterday is we're moving away from keyword targeting and let the system deal with that. And that's because, putting a 2-3 word keyword in the UI, matching to really complex conversational queries, there's a bit of a disconnect there. And that kind of makes sense. But then if you take that one step further, we're not matching to keywords or search terms or phrases. We're almost matching to brands, because it's no longer just about the context it has around me and that's what I'm searching. It's deeper than that. It kind of knows the kind of brand I'm more likely to have a greater affinity with. And so that matching ability gets even better. And that makes sense to me as well, because the platforms, if they do that, they're going to drive higher conversion rates and they can charge higher CPCs and CPMs, and that's their revenue keeps growing. And that's kind of a continuation of a trend. Make the advertising even better, charge more, and everyone's happy with the trade-off generally. So yeah, it's a huge rabbit hole. Very excited. Same as you, very, very excited. One question for you. I noticed that a couple of days ago, Perplexity released, I think, Perplexity Labs. And I think I've seen a few things in the press around maybe talks with Apple, Safari, about a distribution deal there. It feels like if anyone's going to get ahead of Google and in the search landscape, especially since they've now released AI mode, that they're going to have to figure out the distribution. Like, they need to do a big partnership with someone so they can be the default search engine. I know this is a huge question. Do you think that'll happen? Do you think Perplexity will be default on like an iOS?
Interesting. My mind is more on the hardware device that OpenAI is bringing out with Johnny Ive. Like, you saw, they just acquired IO, his company. And it seems like most of that, like, as far as I can tell, they don't have any like products out in the world. IO, it seems like they just acquired the best team of designers on the planet, pretty much. So if anyone's going to do it, they're going to do it, and I'm super excited. They said that hardware device is going to come out next year. Super excited what that might be. Apparently it might be like some kind of pendant with a camera and a microphone, like a little Pebble kind of device. They talk about it being the third device on your desk. So like your MacBook, your iPhone, and then that third like wearable device, even though they said it's not a wearable, but maybe they're just redefining the category, which I guess is what you do at that point, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm super excited about the hardware stuff, because I think we yet to see like great AI hardware come about. So that would be my backhanded like answer to your question, is I don't really think it matters so much with software now. I think the software piece is really good. We're just waiting on the hardware piece because we don't really have many like AI first hardware coming out yet, but I think we will in the next year or two, which is super exciting. And to go back to your point about like SEO teams, I completely agree. There's something I've said for a long time as well, is like, speak to the SEO people as much as possible, speak to your SEO team, speak to organic people as much as possible, because they'll always know way more about like frequently asked questions, long tail keywords, stuff like that we've kind of seen coming into Google Ads more. And I think it'll just be a continuation of that. You're talking about sort of voice-based search or, ChatGPT-based search and ads. I think it will just be a continuation of like more long tail stuff. When you get rid of keywords, it'll be more like question-based, which we've seen coming for a while. I just think AI like really accelerated that, right? And I always give a shout out to like also ask.com, just because they're like the tool I've used for, again, like years and years and years now, in terms of putting your brand name, putting your keywords, and then you get the frequently asked questions back around that topic. And you can literally just build your ad copy, your landing page, and even your brand around those frequently asked questions. And it's just something that people don't do enough, when that's like literally your your best target audience and research, right?
What was that tool called again? Also Ask?
Yeah, also asked.com. There's also Answer the Public as well, but I prefer also asked.com. Yeah, it's an awesome tool.
Yeah, that's awesome. I hadn't actually heard of that. We'll drop a link in the show notes for that, as well as the masterclass, the ad copy masterclass, because I'm sure a lot of people would be super interested in that. The last question I have for you, and I feel like you kind of answered it, is what excites you most about search right now? And if it was one of your previous answers, that's fine. But that was the last question I had for you.
Yeah, what excites me about search? I think going back to the old school fundamentals, probably. I think it's just something that I love that Google is indirectly shining more of a light on them now. It comes back to landing page, it comes back to ad copy. I don't love, this is no secret, I don't love like the advanced stuff out there. I don't love all these hacks and all these sort of like sneaky hacks that people come up with because they just work for like, a few weeks and then Google changes the algorithm or features or products change. So I'm much more about teaching people the fundamentals, because if you have the right systems, the right frameworks, like they're going to stand the test of time and they're not going to become outdated when Google changes things, right? Like as far as I can see, we're still going to have landing pages, we're still going to have ad copy, and even if it's automated ad copy, it's going to come from the landing page and it's going to come from your targeting and what you put into the system. So, it all comes back to the fundamentals of advertising and marketing, which I love, like I'm super passionate about. So yeah, I'm happy about a lot of the changes as far as search.
Nice. That reminds me of something that Ashwin Balakrishnan, we had him on a week or two ago, and he was talking about how, for a period of time you could get away with not being a marketing person and run these platforms, but that's changed now. You kind of have to be a marketing person. And the other good thing about focusing on the fundamentals, as you just said there, is that does transcend Google Ads. You can take those same principles and be good at most of the channels and platforms. So really good advice. Awesome. This is great. Appreciate you coming on, Tomasz.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.